Part 2 of Chapter 3 from Erich Fromm's The Art of Loving, Love's Disintegration in Western Society. Love is not the result of adequate sexual satisfaction, but sexual happiness. Even the knowledge of the so-called sexual technique is the result of love. If aside from everyday observation, this thesis needed to be proved, such proof can be found in ample material of psychoanalytic data. The study of the most frequent sexual problems, frigidity in women, and the more or less severe forms of psychic impotence in men, shows that the cause does not lie in a lack of knowledge of the right technique, but in the inhibitions which make it impossible to love. Fear of, or hatred for the other sex, are at the bottom of those difficulties which prevent a person from giving himself completely, from acting spontaneously, from trusting the sexual partner in the immediacy and directness of physical closeness. If a sexually inhibited person can emerge from fear or hate and hence become capable of loving, his or her sexual problems are solved. If not, no amount of knowledge about sexual techniques will help. But while the data of psychoanalytic therapy point to the fallacy of the idea that knowledge of the correct sexual technique leads to sexual happiness and love, the underlying assumption that love is the concomitant of mutual sexual satisfaction was largely influenced by the theories of Freud. For Freud, love was basically a sexual phenomenon. Quote, "Man having found by experience that sexual or genital love afforded him his greatest gratification, so that it became in fact a prototype of all happiness to him, must have been thereby impelled to seek his happiness further along the path of sexual relations, to make genital eroticism the central point of his life." This is from Freud's great work, Civilization and its Discontents, translated by J. Rivera, The Hogarth Press, Limited, London, 1953, page 69. The experience of brotherly love is, for Freud, an outcome of sexual desire, but with the sexual instincts being transformed into an impulse with inhibited aim. Love, with an inhibited aim, was indeed originally full of sensual love, and in man's unconscious mind is so still. As far as the feeling of fusion, of oneness, or oceanic feeling, which is the essence of mystical experience and the root of the most intense sense of union with one other person or with one's fellow men, is concerned, it was interpreted by Freud as a pathological phenomenon, as a regression to a state of an early limitless narcissism. See Civilization and its Discontents, page 21. It is only one step further that for Freud, love is in itself an irrational phenomenon. The difference between irrational love and love as an expression of the mature personality does not exist for him. He pointed out in a paper on transference love that transference love is essentially not different from the normal phenomenon of love. Falling in love always verges on the abnormal, is always accompanied by blindness to reality, compulsiveness, and is a transference from love objects of childhood. Love as a rational phenomenon, as a crowning achievement of maturity, was, to Freud, no subject matter for investigation, since it had no real existence. However, it would be a mistake to overestimate the influence of Freud's ideas on the concept that love is the result of sexual attraction, or rather that it is the same as sexual satisfaction, reflected in conscious feeling. Essentially, the causal nexus precedes the other way around. Freud's ideas were partly influenced by the spirit of the 19th century. Partly they became popular through the prevailing spirit of the years after the First World War. Some of the factors which influenced both the popular and the Freudian concepts were, first, the reaction against the strict mores of the Victorian age. The second factor determining Freud's theories lies in the prevailing concept of man, which is based on the structure of capitalism. In order to prove that capitalism corresponded to the natural seeds of man, one had to show that man was by nature competitive and full of mutual hostility. While economists proved this in terms of the insatiable desire for economic gain, and the Darwinists in terms of the biological law of the survival of the fittest. Freud came to the same result by the assumption that man is driven by a limitless desire for the sexual conquest of all women, and that only the pressure of society prevented man from acting on his desires. As a result, men are necessarily jealous of each other, and this mutual jealousy and competition would continue, even if all social and economic reasons for it would disappear. Footnote: the only pupil of Freud who ever separated from the master, and yet who in the last years of his life changed his views on love, was Sandor Ferenczi. For an excellent discussion on this subject, see The Leaven of Love by Izette de Forest, Harper and Brothers, New York, 1954. Eventually, Freud was largely influenced in his thinking by a type of materialism prevalent in the 19th century. One believed that the substratum of all mental phenomena was to be found in physiological phenomena. Hence, love, hate, ambition, jealousy were explained by Freud as so many outcomes of various forms of the sexual instinct. He did not see that the basic reality lies in the totality of human existence, first of all in the human situation common to all men, and secondly, in the practice of life determined by the specific structure of society. The decisive step beyond this type of materialism was taken by Marx in his historical materialism, in which not the body nor an instinct like the need for food or possession serves as the key to the understanding of a man, but the total life process of man, his practice of life. According to Freud, the full and uninhibited satisfaction of all instinctual desires would create mental health and happiness, but the obvious clinical facts demonstrate that men and women who devote their lives to unrestricted sexual satisfaction do not attain happiness and very often suffer from severe neurotic conflicts or symptoms. The complete satisfaction of all instinctual needs is not only not a basis for happiness, it does not even guarantee sanity. Yet Freud's idea could only have become so popular in the period after the First World War because of the changes which had occurred in the spirit of capitalism, from the emphasis on saving to that on spending, from self-frustration as a means for economic success to consumption as the basis for an ever-widening market, and as the main satisfaction for the anxious, automatized individual. Not to postpone the satisfaction of any desire became the main tendency in the sphere of sex as well as in that of all material consumption. It is interesting to compare the concepts of Freud, which correspond to the spirit of capitalism as it existed, yet unbroken, around the beginning of this century, with the theoretical concepts of one of the most brilliant contemporary psychoanalysts, the late H.S. Sullivan. In Sullivan's psychoanalytic system, we find, in contrast to Freud's, a strict division between sexuality and love. What is the meaning of love and intimacy in Sullivan's concept? Quote, intimacy is that type of situation involving two people which permits validation of all components of personal worth. Validation of personal worth requires a type of relationship which I call collaboration, by which I mean clearly formulated adjustments of one's behavior to the expressed needs of the other person in pursuit of increasingly identical, that is, more and more nearly mutual satisfactions, and in the maintenance of increasingly similar security operations. Footnote: see H.S. Sullivan's The Interpersonal Theory of Psychiatry by W. W. Norton and Co., New York, 1953, page 246. It must be noted that although Sullivan gives this definition in connection with the strivings of pre-adolescence, he speaks of them as integrating tendencies, coming out during pre-adolescence, quote, which when they are completely developed we call love. And he says that this love in pre-adolescence, quote, represents the beginning of something very like full-blown, psychiatrically defined love. End of footnote. If we free Sullivan's statement from its somewhat involved language. The essence of love is seen in a situation of collaboration, in which two people feel, "We play according to the rules of the game to preserve our prestige and feelings of superiority and merit." Footnote, see the Interpersonal Theory of Psychiatry, page 246 again. Another definition of love by Sullivan, that love begins when a person feels another person's needs to be as important as his own, is less colored by the marketing aspect than the above formulation. Just as Freud's concept of love is a description of the experience of the patriarchal male in terms of 19th century capitalism, Sullivan's description refers to the experience of the alienated marketing personality of the 20th century. It is a description of an egotism ad deo, of two people pooling their common interests and standing together against a hostile and alienated world. Actually, his definition of intimacy is in principle valid for the feeling of any cooperating team, in which everybody adjusts his behavior to the expressed needs of the other person in the pursuit of common aims. It is remarkable that Sullivan speaks here of expressed needs, when the least one could say about love is that it implies a reaction to unexpressed needs between two people. Love as mutual sexual satisfaction, and love as teamwork, and as a haven from aloneness, are the two normal forms of the disintegration of love in modern Western society, the socially patterned pathology of love. There are many individualized forms of the pathology of love, which result in conscious suffering, and which are considered neurotic by psychiatrists, and an ever-increasing number of laymen alike. Some of the more frequent ones are briefly described in the following examples. The basic condition for neurotic love lies in the fact that one or both of the lovers have remained attached to the figure of a parent and transfer the feelings, expectations, and fears one once had toward father or mother to the loved person in adult life. The persons involved have never emerged from a pattern of infantile relatedness and seek for this pattern in their affective demands in adult life. In these cases, the person has remained, affectively, a child of 2 or of 5, or of 12, while intellectually and socially he is on the level of his chronological age. In the more severe cases, this emotional immaturity leads to disturbances in his social effectiveness. In the less severe ones, the conflict is limited to the sphere of intimate personal relationships.